Thank you for joining us at the PropertyGuru Asia Real Estate Summit's first virtual edition. We'll now hear from our global speakers to cover the social pillar of sustainability. Let's begin this segment with our policy keynote from the Digital Minister of Taiwan, Audrey Tang. Talking about constructing digital solutions, Minister Tang will be giving us a look at Taiwan's digital transformation and leadership in collaborative governance, sustainable infrastructure, and open innovation.
Hello, I'm Audrey Tang, Taiwan's Digital Minister. I would like to share something that Dr. Tsai Ing-wen, our president, said during her first inauguration speech. She's on her second term now. But on the first term inauguration speech, she said something that I consider very inspiring. She said, "Before, we think of democracy as clash between opposing values. But now, we need to think of democracy as conversation between many diverse values." And indeed, in public administration, there's many people who thought that the government is like this rope in between. For example, one side may be the economic sector, want to develop industry, and the other side may be the people caring about the environment and the sustainability, and there were intention of against each other, and it's the public servants in the middle that need to absorb all the tension. Or maybe one side are the innovators that would like to disrupt the society using their new AI inventions. And the other side, of course, is people who care about social justice, about access to fair opportunity, and so on, and who will then want to regulate these disruptive inventions. And again, the government would be in the middle. But previously, when each innovation still have a person, a representative speaking, either as a leader of a union or a leader of an association, leader of a parliamentary group, or so on, that was manageable. But nowadays, as I said, the hashtag doesn't have a spokesperson. And so our participation officers need to use a different way to think about the governance when it comes to the digital age. And this is co-gov, co-creative, collaborative governance. And what you're looking at here is my office, literally my office. It's the Social Innovation Lab in Taipei City. It's next to the Jianguo Flower Market, and it's literally a park. We tore down all the walls so people can just walk in and enjoy the people working. For example, this public art is the work of people with Down syndrome, with trisomy differences. Turns out that when we look at the world, of course, we see data, where you're data officers, of course, we see data, and then we see the mathematical structures, and we see the physics, and so on. But people with Down syndrome, they see the world as geometric, as topological connections. So when they draw out in their mind their thought processes into art, it's like Van Gogh's paintings. Suddenly people will feel very creative. And so instead of treating them as vulnerable groups of people, the social innovators in Taiwan made sure that a society can benefit from their unique perspective. And so the Social Innovation Lab is basically the place where people can make sure that these kind of social innovation can amplify through this design of more than 12 ministries residing here. And also, every Wednesday, anyone can have 40 minutes of my time, or a little bit shorter if you're walk-in. But all I ask is that we publish as video or as a transcript of after 10 days of co-editing everything that we have said. And so this kind of open innovation made sure that when people from MIT, I think this is a Media Lab project called Persuasive Electric Vehicles, or the PEV, and these PEV makers went to me, I think, quite a few times around 3 years ago, saying that, Minister, we have this electric vehicles that drives by itself, but we're not quite sure what they're good for. And I'm like, sure, the Social Innovation Lab is an open space, and you can just put your PEVs here and see how the market, literally the Jianguo flower market, reacts to it. Well, so I was there many times. I remember a time where an elderly couple from the Jianguo flower market holding some orchid flowers in small pots and asking me, Minister, what are you doing with these shopping carts? I'm like, these are not shopping carts. These are self-driving vehicles. You hop on one, it drives you places. And they're like, well, they look like shopping carts. And they tried putting their orchid flowers in it, in the basket, and it worked. And they said, we don't need a self-driving vehicle that drives us places. Taipei has pretty good taxi and metro and other public transportation. But they say, well, in the Jianguo flower market, it's very crowded. We would like a shopping cart that follows us around so that we can do hands-free shopping. That we would just buy something, put it in the basket, and when it's full, they heard about platooning. So it would step back and then invite something, another PEV, and form a fleet. Well, to work with these kind of work, it need to look different. And so you see people from the MIT Media Lab, I think that's Phil Tin, and yours truly, trying out new designs in the Social Innovation Lab with the help of people in the Taipei Tech that's just nearby. Because this is open source and open hardware, we were able then to add on some eyes, and these eyes would show other people who they are following, who they are looking at, and to make it a much more pro-social rather than anti-social, like not a cyclop, so that it will fit in with the rest of people in the Jianguo flower market and also in the Social Innovation Lab. And this is what I call a norm-first innovation strategy. We make sure that we first include people in the real society, co-creating the norm on which that these PEVs can work with the society. And then we co-domesticate with the entire city. So nowadays, my grandma, who's in her 80s, actually just told me that she just tried a self-driving vehicle in New Taipei City, and it worked really well. And the same thing that we learned from this PEV are also getting translated into the bus that works in the after midnight hours when metro stopped working, also in Taipei City. So there's dozens of Sandbox experiments like this happening in Taiwan, always with a norm-first philosophy. In Sustainable Development Goal SDG terms, that's target 1717, encouraging effective partnerships. So every year we hold an annual presidential hackathon, making sure that people from all walks of life can amplify their ideas into national agenda. And the award of presidential hackathon is this micro projector. Each year we give out 5 to domestic teams. We also have an international track. But for domestic teams, each recipient, when they turn on the micro projector, that is the trophy, there's no prize money, there's just this trophy. The trophy projects Dr. Tsai Ing-wen's image. The president herself says, okay, whatever you have created in the past 3 months as a prototype, we promise that we will make it our national policy, our national direction in the next 12 months. So that's executive presidential power as a hackathon prize. And so there's many innovations, such as these people from Taiwan Water Corporation using assistive intelligence or AI to make sure that they don't have to keep listening to the pipes that are not leaking. They can concentrate their time on the pipes that are actually leaking. And the machine learning, the deep learning reduced the time it takes to detect leaking pipes from 2 months to 2 days. And there's also innovations such as for remote islands using telemedicine to make sure that instead of asking each time that there's a serious like major trauma and so on to fly via helicopter to the main Taiwan island, people in the, say, Orchid Island can have a high bandwidth connection with the helicopter dispatch and also with the specialized doctor in the main Taiwan island and with the local doctor or nurse performing the instructions from the specialized doctors, they can win the trust from the local people, making sure that they are trusted by the local people and they don't have to send every patient through helicopters. We also change our telemedicine laws for that. Or, for example, people who care about, here you see air quality, water quality, and so on, can form data collaboratives that make sure that the citizen scientists can work with institutional scientists and share the same data service platform on our CI, civil IoT.taiwan.gov.tw, so that if you go to the CI, the Taiwan platform, you can see very clearly that people of social sector, economic sector, and the public sector are working on the same set of data to make sure not only that we can send advanced earthquake warnings through SMS to the people who would likely be affected, we can also warn people who are going to be affected by a flood in an advance warning before a typhoon hits, and so on. And these, by the way, gets repurposed during the pandemic as the digital fence system that works with what people already understand, which is cell phone tower triangulation and SMS messages, rather than forcing them to install an app or turn on the GPS. So again, we use the data collaboratives that are trusted because it's co-created with civil society for counter-pandemic purposes. And one of the most popular maps from Finzhenkiang, Jiangminzong in Tainan City was also basically repurposing this air quality map to show mask availability. The air quality map you see here that went back quite a few years ago, all the thousands of points here are done by people who volunteer their schools, like primary school teachers, their balconies, and so on, to measure like PM 2.5, the air quality, and share it to a distributed ledger so nobody can go in time to modify the records. And so the great thing about this is that, well, the more people are worried about air quality, the more people would then set up such inexpensive, less than $100 stations. And the collaboratives that they form is democratically governed, making sure that they have the social mandate so they can talk to the environment minister saying, hey, we would like you to check our numbers and calibrate the numbers, making sure that our machines work in high humidity days and so on. But in return, we would like you to fill in the gaps, the places around here that doesn't have a measurement device. Well, that was because these are industrial parks or private lands that, of course, the primary school teachers cannot break and enter and install. And so it turns out we own the lamp in those municipal governments, as well as in the science parks, industrial parks. So we just use their design and then added such weather stations, micro weather stations in the industrial areas, again, contributing like a puzzle from all the different sites to make sure that we not only educate our K-12 students in data stewardship, which is very hard to teach from a consumer's perspective, but very easy if they start operating their own air boxes. And the global citizenship and sustainable development, like climate science, is also a major curriculum item in Taiwan. And we also work with anyone across the world that decides to download the Airbox and run it locally on a Raspberry Pi or on a Arduino. And so each time, whenever we run a presidential hackathon, there's a lot of AI times CI or extended intelligence teams that augments the collective intelligence into all sorts of different sustainable development goal targets. And where do we find the people who want to propose such presidential hackathon items? Well, we empower people who are closest to the pain. I personally, every other week or so, go to the most remote places, most rural, indigenous lands, remote islands, and so on. And I go by myself. And I join their town halls and stay for a couple of days on an ethnographic hangout, and sometimes with a cultural translator for the indigenous language. There's more than 20 national language in Taiwan, most of which indigenous. And we make sure that the people, for them, it's just another town hall. But when I join the town hall, helping to facilitate, I bring with me all the 12 ministries, section chiefs or higher, from the Social Innovation Lab in two-way video conferencing. And so it makes sure that people who talk about things can be listened in its entirety in a context, ensuring responsive and inclusive decision-making, because all the 12 ministries would then listen to the entire story instead of just a few abstractions. And whenever there's new ideas, like during the presidential hackathon, that need to break existing regulations a little bit, we arrange a sandbox where they can do so for like 3 months, 6 months, or up to a year, and try their new forked version of the regulation. If it's a good idea, then it will become our regulation. If it's a bad idea, well, everybody learn a little bit. Again, in a risk-contained way, this is how we work to make sure that knowledge sharing and collaboration and science and innovation benefits the entire society. And finally, when I say it's a good idea, well, what is a good idea? For example, was UberX a good idea? Well, in 2015, we used the AI-powered conversation system, Polis, which is now a part of Taiwanese government. There's polis.gov.tw, a open source software becoming polis.gov.tw that shows through k-means clustering and principal dimension reduction, the PCA, principal component analysis, making sure that everybody can see where they stand when it comes to the feeling part on the emerging technology. This is the actual map that we showed on the UberX case. And so we first present people with facts, open data from all sectors. And then we use Polis to ask people's feelings. There's no right or wrong. For the same fact, I can feel happy, they can feel angry, and it's all okay. And after those feelings gets resonating with each other, then we can say the best ideas are the ideas that take care of people's feelings. And finally, we turn them into decisions. And so the experience of Polis is like this. You can see one sentiment from your fellow citizen, like passenger liability insurance, very important for UberX. If you agree, you would move toward me a little bit. If you disagree, you will move afar. However, there's no reply button, so there's no point for trolling. That you can't troll it without a reply button. So you can just share what you feel with each other. And after 3 weeks, we always get this picture. And this may be the most important picture of this entire hour of talk. Instead of the institutional and some antisocial social media would lead us believe that we live in a polarized world, actually most people agree with most of each other on most of the things, most of the time. And this is not something about the Taiwanese culture. This picture I'm showing here is from Bowling Green, Kentucky. No matter people who identify as Democrats or Republican, everybody agree that in addition to science, technology, engineering, and math, we need to add art to it. And so, I mean, this is such a simple consensus, but if the people really care about it, using Polis, they can discover that we're not that different from each other after all. And that is the basis of the democratic polity. So we further develop the measurement of progress. Our KPI is set by the crowd using an API. So finally, I would like to share with you my job description. As you can see from my presentation, I'm more of an innovation space in the middle that would enable people who care about different sustainable development goals to co-create common values and deliver innovation that moves these values forward. And in SDG terms, these are reliable data, 1718, effective partnerships, 1717, and open innovation, 176. And when I became the digital minister 4 years ago, the SDGs were really new. And so the HR department asked me to translate these into plain English. And that's my job description. I will read it to you now as a conclusion. When we see the Internet of Things, let's make it the Internet of Beings. When we see virtual reality, let's make it shared reality. When we see machine learning, let's make it collaborative learning. When we see user experience, let's make it about human experience. And whenever we hear the singularity is near, let us always remember the plurality is here. Thank you for listening.